Has any of that been, was any of that, no it wasn't, was it? There was, because I could see the little, was it working? So you recorded all the, that I just said?
We usually record it and cut your antics out.
And so did you just now start recording?
We have it on tape, and the hard drive really keeps it gets stuff to the hard drive.
I did not. So now we are learning some of the tricks of the videographers. He's got two devices, tape in camera, hard drive external to camera. And so he's been taping onto the videotape in the camera this whole time, but he only just now started the hard drive, which, is that the higher quality? Is that the higher video quality will be on the hard drive? And so my antics don't get hard drive space. By beginning of the class, I don't know, but this is kind of funny. Were you coached on this? She was coached on this. I'm asking all the wrong questions he is thinking right at the moment. But anyway, that was kind of fun. So today, what are we talking about? What page? 359, page 359, which is kind of a random page to be starting on, but that is where we're starting today. And we're talking about joint costs. Has anyone here ever been involved in the process of buying maybe a full cow's worth of beef or half a cow's worth of beef? Have you ever bought a side of beef? Side of beef, anybody? Side of beef. And so, steak isn't, steak isn't grown, as a steak. It's kind of cut down to get to that size. And so, meat starts out in grown animals, right?
12,000 a year. This is what we get. Tweet comes from animals.
I'm glad you feel like you're getting your money's worth there. And happy cows come from California. Happy milk specifically comes from California. Because I don't know if they're really happy once they're, as they're being killed. And that might, affect the taste of the meat. But anyway, so meat comes from animals. We're good with that. And so you can buy, Christy, did you know you can buy half a cow?
I'm well aware. Yep.
Yeah, you were. And so imagine this process. Cow is killed, skinned, gutted, all that fun kind of stuff. And, then there's the process of, all that has to happen, right? Along with, the spine being removed. And then you've got two halves, right? How would you think to allocate the costs of the skinning and gutting and spine removal to the cost of the halves of the cow? Is there somebody in the world whose job it is to assign those costs? Yes, there is, believe it or not. And so how would you do that? Half and half. Okay? And then, but now we've got the issues of, welcome. Now we've got issues of how do we assign costs to, subparts of that cow? How do we assign costs to subparts of that cow? Because if we've got a chunk of meat, if we've got a big chunk of meat right here, and we go chop, and you have two cuts of meat, right? How does a business in that business go about assigning the cost of the chop? That's an accounting question. That is an accounting question. It's relatively easy when there's, splitting it 50-50 for the first parts is relatively easy because it is, there's two halves. Makes sense. Split it 50-50, piece of cake, walk in the park. But if you do a chop and you have two unequally sized pieces, in fact, they might even be different types of meat, which has different value, right? Ribs, steak. Ribs, prime rib. Well, that's a bad example. Rib, steak. Do those have the same value per pound? No. And so how do you assign the cost of that chop to the cost to the value, to the meats, to the relative cuts of meats when you're determining how much does it cost to produce that meat, if you will, and how much must that meat be sold for in order to recover those costs. So, and I'm sorry for the kind of the slight grossness of what I've talked about, but it's one of the clearest ways I know of to example it's a joint. We are today talking about joint costs, and that chop, 2 cuts of meat, is a joint cost. It's one action that yields multiple products, and this happens more than you would think in industry. It happens. Joint costs are incurred in flight, airplane travel, right? There are joint costs associated with, fuel, cost of airplane. That sort of stuff is associated with moving all of, if we were to stick all of us on a plane and move us to somewhere where it was more comfortable, that would be one big joint cost, the cost of flying that plane. Joint costs are very frequently associated with sometimes producing different quality of electronic gadgets, like chips or transistors or that sort of thing, because one process is used, but just almost random variation can cause different levels of quality. So you would have one joint cost that produces many different qualities of some of these products. And so these are joint costs. Did anybody take any notes? Because I just defined for you a joint cost.
No.
Did I not?
Sure.
One activity, multiple products. The chop into meat is one very clear visual and graphic example. One chop, 2 pieces of meat. That is a joint cost of those 2 pieces of meat. Okay. So there are, in general, 2 ways to assign those costs to these pieces of meat, or to whatever there is that are joint costs. It just so happens that the example that your in-class assignment example does involve pieces of meat. And the 2 biggest ways, if you look on the next page, there are a few more listed, but the 2 biggest ways are based upon either the number of physical units, 1 chop, 2 pieces of meat, or based upon the relative sales value of those pieces of meat. So those are the 2 methods. Physical units method, those are the 2 biggest, most common methods. Physical units method or relative sales value method. And so today you have an in-class assignment, do it in groups of 2 to 4 people. You're being asked to do it in this way without me showing you prior, in part because this is fairly straightforward. So kind of chug through, you've got an example in the handy handbook. And so on your mark, get set, go. Abilene. You're going to turn in 1 per group. Turn in 1 per group. On your mark, get set, go.